Hello, my name is Woody. Thank you for listening to Change in the House of Pods, a podcast about Deftones. Frank Maddocks is the VP of Creative at Warner Records. Go as far back as White Pony. If you've laid eyes on official Deftones art, he's been responsible for it. The cover art, the photos, even the fonts, everything. And we talked about all of it, even the stuff he didn't do. I mean, we talk about all 9 album covers here. Without question, this is one of the coolest conversations I've ever had in my life. I mean, when I started this podcast, before I started this podcast, Frank was at the top of the list of people I wanted to speak to. I mean, the images over the years, like, damn. And what's funny is it wasn't until about March or April when I really started to obsess over Deftones again that I began to realize the full extent of Frank's work, Deftones and beyond. And until this conversation, I certainly didn't know how deeply connected he is to our favorite band. I mean, he's like a day one fan. I really hope you enjoy this chat half as much as I did. I am humbled and deeply grateful to share my conversation with Frank Maddocks. Okay, so I know you were a fan of Deftones prior to working with them. My first question is, how did you get into Deftones?
I got into the band. I received a cassette tape sampler at a clothing trade show I was at called ASR. It was back in the, this is 25 years ago, probably. It was just a trade show where all different vendors have their clothing lines for the year. And they used to pass out tons of stickers and promo items. And I happened to get a cassette tape from Maverick Records. And it was, it had 7 words or had Root and Nosebleed on it. And had never heard of the band. And this is before Adrenaline came out. And just, instantly fell in love with it. And it became like, kind of like a new passion at that point, like finding out more about the band. And honestly, it was like, that music at that time was unlike anything I had ever heard at that point. So it was like super exciting.
Was that it was a sampler like with other artists on it, or was it just?
No, it was just a 2-track Deftones sampler. And I guess it was announcing that or kind of like before Adrenaline came out. So it was like, just to get people stoked. You used to do that thing back in the day. There was like street team samplers. People would like, leave, people would pass them out on the street or at venues and stuff like that. It was like a, just a promotional type of tool. And it had, I think it was Root and Nosebleed on it.
And you were into it right away.
Right away, man. Honestly, I got to tell you, like, I listened to it and I was like, blown away in that it was so unique. I'd listened to lots of heavy music, and I just feel like at that time it just sounded so interesting to me. I had to try to figure out more about this band, and it became just like this thing. And there wasn't a ton of information available at that time, so it was kind of intriguing.
So what happened next? Did you see them live? Did you just cop the album when it dropped, or what was next in your like fan experience?
So it's next was probably digging a little bit deeper. Saw them live at the Whiskey. They opened up for Bad Brains on 4th of July, like in the probably late 90s. I guess if Adrenaline came out like 96, somewhere in there, if I'm not mistaken. So, this must have been 95. Because Adrenaline wasn't even out. So we had tickets to go see Bad Brains. Deftones were opening, and I was like, we got to see this band. I'm, really into them. Then, that kind of just was like the start of like going to a lot of shows. And they played a lot of shows back in the day, like around LA, the Viper Room, the Whiskey, the Roxy, that whole circuit. So, you could catch them every, all of them. Yeah. Dragonfly. There wasn't a show that they played that I missed. In fact, saw them twice in one night. They opened for Anthrax at the Palace, and then we saw them later at the Viper Room. They played like a super late set, so like 2 times one night.
Do you remember anything about that? Because that seems really like wildly unique, right? Like that's a young band on the rise, playing a show after midnight, or at least it feels that way to me. Do you remember seeing like what that experience was like at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m.?
100%. Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, it was a really exciting time. It was an exciting time in my life. I was young and, still in college, and, and I felt like, and I think a lot of people feel this way about the band, but they were, very similar into, like, I could tell that they were interested in the same things I was interested in, whether it's the background in skateboarding or, um, I don't want to say like hip hop, but like an urban influence, just like, and I mean urban in that it's like city. But yeah, it was just a really exciting time. I felt like these are like, people that I can identify with. And I think the accessibility at that point was really cool. Like seeing a band that was like really, you were really fond of, but it wasn't really that difficult to see them.
Did you have merch or anything like were you like me and you got like weird B-side albums or like just different rare stuff? Did you cop them on that level at that stage?
I did. I bought a few things. I bought a T-shirt that had the rainbow design on the front of it. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's like it was a bright orange shirt, and it just says Deftones and like Helvetica rounded. It's very like looks like a little kid's shirt with like a little rainbow. It was great. And then I bought the Metallica ripoff, the Metallica vibe hoodie, which I still have. So I was stoked to get that for like $40 at the whiskey one night.
You still have it?
Still have it, man. It's got some holes in it, but I still have it. Yeah, it's a killer hoodie.
That's so sick.
And I did receive like another promo sampler somewhere that is like a different one that's got I'm sure you guys have all seen it, but it's maybe that one has 7 words in like board or something on it. And then like signing up to be part of like the fan club, I guess it was called at the time, I received a 7-inch of 7 words that I still have.
That's so cool. That's rad that you were like, because I've heard you say on the other podcast that you've been on recently, which have been great. I loved your conversation with Patio Slave recently. But I heard you say that you were a fan before getting to work with them. And it's cool to sort of flesh that out a little bit and hear like how deeply you were a fan, because it sounds like you were totally into their music. And then you just volunteered or you lobbied to work with them on White Pony.
I did. It's kind of cool getting to talk to you because you are just dedicated to Deftones, and my story with those guys is so long. So like, in other podcasts, I have to keep, abbreviate it a little bit. So it's nice to kind of get to expand on it. I was in art school at the time, so I was starting to do some things, where I could create my own assignments, and I would do mock things for Deftones. Like I would do like a flyer or a poster, or a silkscreen thing. So I then started taking those to shows and throwing them on stage, hoping that the guys would see me. Like I literally remember hand cutting postcards and throwing them on the whiskey stage, like before and after their set. Nothing ever came of it. I was lucky enough to meet some of the guys at a Warped Tour down in like Irvine. And I think it was Frank and Chi and Chino. I saw Frank like, kind of like in the backstage area. And I was like, hey, I just want to introduce myself. I'm really into your music, blah, blah, blah. I'm an artist. I'd actually just done a piece based on one of their songs that was featured in Ray Gun magazine. So I kind of had that as my calling card. I was like, I actually have something printed in a magazine, which was like a really cool mag at the time, based on one of your songs. So I gave them copies of that, and they invited me back on the bus, and we just chatted and kind of like, I was like, I'm really into your music. I wasn't working at Warner's at this time. I was still in school, but I was like, if you guys ever, need help, I'd love to work with you guys. So cut to probably, I don't know, a year later when I am at Warner's and I hear that they're coming out with, their 3rd record on Maverick. I reach out to the art director at Maverick and I say, I'd really like to work on this record. She sends my work over to the band and management. I think that they remember me and appreciate the work, and then, kind of embrace me and invite me to join.
That's amazing.
It's pretty crazy, dude. When people always ask me like, what's some pointers and everything. And I always say like, just do, try your hardest, keep working hard, put yourself out there. And all those things are like what I did, like, who knows if anything was going to ever come of all of that stuff that I was doing, but something did come of it. And, even if it didn't, all that hard work still pays off in some way. So, It's a pretty amazing story.
Do you have that stuff still? Do you have like copies of those things? I mean, you were in
I have
college.
I have the copy of the magazine and the actual physical piece that I made. A friend of mine actually has that hanging in his house. Because it was like a kind of 24 by 36 silk screened piece on wood panel with like collage, and it was loosely based on one of their songs, Be Quiet and Drive, off of Fur. But yeah, and I have like maybe some kind of digital copies of some of the stuff that I made that was early on.
That's
The originals, I
remarkable.
think I probably painted over or destroyed or something, because that's kind of like what I tend to do sometimes. But
Wow, that's so cool. Um, that's mind blowing. I wonder what you thought of the first two covers.
I thought Adrenaline was awesome. I was really into how kind of quiet it was and soft, and just very beautiful and elegant. And I loved the way that mixed with the music. Like, that's one of those covers that just kind of like is a classic to me.
Wow.
And Around the Fur, I remember going to Tower Records to buy that the day it came out, and being um just found the cover very interesting. And it wasn't like it wasn't something that I expected, but then I kind of like really embraced that. I liked that it kind of, wasn't exactly like a first read, and it feels very like alternative. Like, it's very that time to me, in hindsight. Like, it's so 19, 96, 7, whatever that is, 8. Um, just the use of typography on the back, and the crop and all that, and then after digging in a little bit more, the fact that it's a Rick Cossack photo is dope. And then finding out more about that night, and, it's a great cover. It's not what I expected, but I love it.
I wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about why, because I'm not an expert by any means. I feel like I can appreciate art, and I definitely enjoy it. Um, but I don't always understand it. Can you please help me understand this a little bit more? This Adrenaline cover, and I understand what you're saying about the simplicity, but like, um, I'm at the same time baffled by it.
Well, I think that there's like multiple ways to talk about that art and art in general, right? Like, so if I'm talking about it from, I guess I just described it from a fan's perspective, or my opinion.
Sure.
From like an album cover perspective, like, or somebody who makes album covers, I think, the simplicity and the softness and the kind of like push and pull is really cool. Like, it's aggressive music, right? But then you've got this cover that's very like soft. In further research, I never knew what that thing was. I knew it was some kind of a syringe or something like that. I believe that this is the correct kind of lineage of how that happened. But I think some of the guys in the band were starting to have babies at that point, and that's something you use to suck, water out of a baby's nose and ears and all that stuff. I
Boogers,
didn't
yeah.
know that. Yeah, I didn't know that until I had kids and I
Me
saw
neither.
this thing. Yeah. So then that takes on like another level, right? Like, so this kind of like speaks to a time in their lives that like this, odd object becomes kind of like strangely important. Um, so, that's
That's
kind of
dope.
like
That's super
where
dope.
I stand on that.
That's the insight. That's the kind of thing that I am not like. I'm not able to get there, and I need somebody to hold my hand and sort of get me there. So I'm sort of hoping, and I can't like ask you to tell me everything about every album, but I really want to. So I'm sort of hoping that you would uh, be kind enough to say a couple of words about like the nine albums, and uh, I don't know if it's some sort of insight or um, I don't know, a story if you've got one, or talking points for the art itself, or like you just did, or anything together. Is that cool? Could we do something like that?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Terrific. So starting with, and I got them all here. I you don't need the reference, I'm sure. With White Pony, I guess I got a question to start off. That was clip art, right? the pony?
I don't know the answer to that. That's an icon that the guys had when I first met up with them, and it was the only piece of the puzzle that was in place at that point.
Okay. And I've heard you say a lot about the pony piece, and obviously, I mean, I'm wearing my pony
I know, I love it.
t-shirt. Like, yeah. Is there anything that you haven't spoken to yet about pony that whether it be, I mean, there's so much. There's so many pieces that have come along with it. I've got this giant, like 7-foot poster of a back. It's like a cheerleader upskirt in my
Oh yeah.
office at work. Like, there's just so many different things. Is there anything that stands out to you that you haven't really addressed about pony?
Wow, I don't know, at this point I think I've talked about how, I approach the aesthetics on that album, the push and pull between kind of like a clean aesthetic on the outside and kind of like a grittier stuff on the inside. It was my first album I ever designed. So that was like a lot of weight and a lot of pressure, not only, for me as a designer, but me working with my most favorite band at the time. So that's kind of like this huge thing, right? Like I'm just getting going and I happen to land my favorite band and it's their highly anticipated third record. So, it was kind of a mind fuck at the time, but I made it through.
Actually, you know what? I do have sort of a weird nuanced question about that. The black bar over Steph's eyes. This is a total geeky fan question. Where did that come from?
It's a great question, man. I love when I get questions I haven't been asked before. That's the self-imposed media blackout by Steph. He's at the time was not a fan of taking pictures, and don't quote me, but I think that the quote was, "Okay, we can take some pictures, but and have my eyes blacked out and everything." And so I worked with James Minchin, who's a photographer, who's a wonderful friend of mine and an amazing photographer. And he and I just like went through all the photos, and even James was like cutting out pieces of black tape and putting them over the prints, and just that
really?
was the kind
like
of
that.
yeah.
Like you had to do it
physical.
like that.
It's not even well. We did because we wanted the aesthetic to look that
Sure.
way. A lot of the photography in that album is kind of like hand overlays, and James did a lot of like transparencies and things kind of like really analog collages, like not in the computer. So yeah, that was Steph's media blackout.
That's so sick. Okay. I'm gonna resist the urge to like keep dragging it on. So self-titled. Whatever top of mind.
Skull and Roses, self-titled. So that's an interesting album. I think we entered that album not really having an idea of what we wanted to do. A lot of the albums that I've done with the guys and with other bands kind of when you have a blank slate and you have there's not a lot of like I don't think, obviously we didn't have an album title because it's self-titled. There wasn't any like preconceived notions of what we were going after, so at that point it's just up to me to kind of come up with stuff. I think I was really into this kind of like Xeroxy photo collage kind of idea. Obviously skulls are something that are super cool and never get tired of. It was just one of the ideas I put together for that album, and it just stuck. There was other ideas with typography on the cover. I think in the end, it not having a title, typography became like not so important. So in the end, I think it was like kind of not a last minute decision, but I feel like the guys were, Chino was like, okay, well, it's going to be self-titled. And then at that point it was like, okay, I was just dealing with Deftones logos on the cover and different formats of that. And then it just kind of like, well, let's just let the art breathe and let's let it just be this kind of like focal point. A completely 180, different from White Pony, in the aesthetic and everything. And it really kind of like took a lot of people by surprise. Like I think people, I was working in Maverick Records at the time when I did that, home to Deftones at the time. And I think people at the label were really surprised when we came through with this album cover. They're expecting like White Pony 2.0, and this thing is anything but. And I feel like subconsciously maybe it was it was speaking to that. It was like, they weren't going to do that with the music and we weren't going to do that with the art.
That's so awesome. Saturday Night Wrist.
Saturday Night Wrist is really a cool one. That's like one of my favorites. Um, that's a very interesting story. When talking with the band and Chino about what they wanted to do for album art, they had the title, which was really, really cool and kind of conjures up all of these interesting things. Chino was like, I have something I want to send you, and I want you to riff off this for the art. So he sent me a video that's called Roxanne, that's like this kind of like sexploitation movie from like the 70s, 60s or 70s. It's not a porno, and it's not like, it's just this weird kind of soft core, weird kind of like just odd movie. And he's like, just watch this and do something like this. So I was like, okay, well, I checked it out and I'm like, well, what can I do with this? It's just really weird. It's about this girl's journey through like becoming a woman and all these strange things that happen to her. And it's actually really interestingly shot and kind of like very analog and all these textures happening. So I just went through the movie and started taking screen grabs of like interesting parts that I thought were cool. And then, then took those screen grabs and kind of came up with the art that makes up the cover. I think I mixed in maybe some textures and some other things of my own, but the main elements from that are from that movie Roxanne. And I probably made 2 or 3 covers that utilized elements like that. There's some other things floating around out there that are pieces of that. And I presented the covers to the guys, and that's the one that was kind of like the fan favorite. It was a really smooth process. Like they actually really, at that point, they really responded well to all the covers, and that was my favorite, and it was their favorite too. So it was like, I was pretty stoked.
That's so rad. Okay. Got to keep moving.
Just one more thing on that. It was,
please.
I don't mean to digress, but like that was, I wouldn't say we got lucky, but I'd made all this art utilizing this film, right? But like we didn't have permission to use all that stuff. So we had to then go back to the lawyers and ask them to try to like find this obscure production company that made this weird movie. In the end, they totally said yes and were cool with it. But that could have really backfired, and that I, presented something to the band that we all liked and didn't have the rights to use any of the images. So I guess we got lucky.
That probably happens a ton in the record industry, just with like clearing samples and that sort of thing, where you run into copyright issues, right? When you want to do
something. I think it happened a lot in the past. I think things are so safe now that like we have to be so buttoned up with everything that we do. Like we can't even use fonts that like we don't own. So like, back in the day, there was a lot of like, kind of gray areas, but now everything is like, you can't get away with anything.
I first off, the show is all about digression, so digress however you like.
Okay,
Second
cool.
of all, I would love to ask you about fonts and stuff, especially given the T-shirt that just dropped with all of the different fonts of Deftones on the back, which is like amazing in so many ways. But I don't even know how to begin to ask about fonts. I heard you talking about the influence in skating and like on the Patio Slip podcast, which everybody should totally check out. Those guys were a lot of fun to listen to. But like, I don't even know, I don't know where else to begin with those, with like a question about fonts. Like, I don't know if to ask, like, how do you come up with that? Or what is the decision? I mean, obviously I think it's about marrying with the aesthetic of the rest of the package, but all of them are always so unique and so singular. It's like, it's so cool to see the rebranding with every album. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what to speak to it. I think it's just worth speaking to.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wouldn't call myself a font guy. I'm not really big on that stuff, and I'm not like a logo guy, but I guess I kind of am, like making all those logos was a lot of fun, and it was like, it's pretty cool to see them all, like the lineage of them. When I had the idea to do that shirt, I was like, working with a lot of this stuff from White Pony. I think I made like 3 different Deftones logos for just White Pony, that we used in conjunction, like the digital looking one, that more angular one, the one that's based off of Avant Garde, which is a font. So then I was like, okay, well, let's take, the one I just did for Ohms, the one, from Saturday Night Wrist, which is like very clean. Obviously you got to throw the Adrenaline and Around the Fur OG logo in there, because it's just like so sick and it's been ripped off so many times. But yeah, I think you nailed it. It's got to fit with what's happening in the artwork, right? Like I'm, would never use a font just because it's a cool font. If it doesn't marry up with like what's happening in the packaging. So that's kind of my perspective on it.
It's so rad because it's like you get the whole package. Like everything is new, and it's like with every album, it's just such a fun experience getting to like see everything tangible, everything like visual, and then obviously the audio experience. Like you really have found a way over the years, especially it's become more nuanced, and it's cool. Like it's a full all encompassing experience.
I think I'm finally figuring it out after 20 years.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. I felt like this time I was like, oh, I'm finally getting this design stuff. All right, cool.
Well, something that I have yet to figure out is Koi no Yokan. What is going on here? Yeah, what is going on here?
That's really easy to explain. I mean, if you've looked at the liner notes, it's a photo by Futura that Chino was really into at the time. That's one that was like, Chino had a vision for sure. He was really into Futura at the time. Futura is like this legendary graffiti artist, one of the four founders really of doing really creative things. Still does like amazing stuff. He worked on some of the Uncle stuff. Some of his drawings were included in all the DJ Shadow Uncle packaging. He's just really sick. He takes these rad photos that like Chino is really digging on. Just so happens that we were working with Futura's son, who goes by 13th Witness, to do the band photos for that album. So there was like a really cool tie-in in that Tim, who was 13th Witness, was shooting the band photos, and then we're going to utilize his dad's photos for the cover and the interior. And that one was really kind of very just smooth. Chino was like, I love this photo. Why don't we, try different crops, try, different placement of the typography on that one. And that just kind of like was very straightforward.
That's brilliant. I knew all of those names, but I did not know the relation and precisely how it worked out. And I guess it's still not entirely clear to me what this is a photo of. Do you?
And I think that we should leave it at that.
That's rad. All right, let's go on to Diamond Eyes then.
Diamond Eyes. That was a fun one. I'm sure you've heard my story. That's another one where we didn't have really anything going into it. Chino had given me a couple of different album titles. I don't think Diamond Eyes was one of them, but similar. I was going to go meet the band in New York for a photo shoot. Again, 13th Witness was shooting that one in New York. And when I was going to present the idea, some cover ideas to the band. So, worked on some stuff before I went there, worked on some stuff on the plane. Diamond Eyes was one of the covers, or that album cover is one of the covers I, designed leading into that meeting. I presented the band with those covers after a day of, shooting around New York. And that one was just instantly like a favorite. Like Chino was like super stoked. The guys were like, that's so rad. Like, I think when you can inspire a really positive response from those guys, it's like they're really great at like showing you that they're really feeling something. They don't hold back. So it's like that was like, we're sitting in the bar at the hotel, and I had my laptop and I was running through all the covers, and that one just was like, that's it. So I left, that night feeling really stoked, but then again got back up to the hotel room and was like, holy shit, I don't have the rights to this photo. So again, I got in the band really stoked on something that I, hadn't buttoned up and have the rights to and everything. Luckily, the photographer, whose name is John Ross, was like super cool, really happy to work with us. And, no one ever even knew that it was, potentially an issue. So it was great. But, a lot of people talk about, the significance of that album, right? And it's Sergio's debut with the band, and kind of a different Deftones. And I see all that, and I think that again, subconsciously, maybe I was like kind of keying into all that. People say it's like, oh, the return. A lot of people say it's like a phoenix, or kind of like the return of Deftones. Not, they never left, but I think there was some question marks after Cheese Accident. And so I think that the very kind of like in your face, clean, triumphant kind of like aesthetic of that album cover is just kind of like, there's no questions, the font is like, the logo is like super legible. Everything is just like 1, 2, boom. There's nothing left to chance. You see it and it's just like, you instantly know, what's up with it.
And there've been like a lot of, I guess I don't know what the word is, but like knockoffs, I guess, so to speak, of, or at least I feel like I see a lot of knockoffs with the owl in different, like on different t-shirts around the world. Like, as a Deftones fan and you're out there, you're like hunting through eBay, see what you could find and that sort of thing. And you see like a lot of different stuff that isn't like official certified merch. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I heard your podcast. You were talking about the one that somebody did with the blue owl, and I have seen that one. I think with the owl, it was easier to rip off because there's more stuff out there that looks similar, right? So you can kind of Google image search owls and like kind of come up with something that you can kind of fake it to look like it's like a merch piece. Fake merch to me, or bootleg merch, I think it's just sad. Like it's, if the band doesn't have anything to do with it, I think it's just not cool at all. Like, unless like it's an artistic interpretation, but if you're legit trying to rip something off and like sell it like as something associated with Deftones or any other band, I think that that's like a slap in the face and it's just not cool. I did hear you guys talking about like, there's so much bootleg stuff for that band. It's like insane. Like I see stuff all the time on Instagram where I'm like, I didn't make that. I didn't make that. I didn't make that. Like, what is that? Who's selling that poster? And I just think it's not cool.
I appreciate that. I respect that. I appreciate you sharing that with me. I think it's nice to have some clarity, frankly, on that issue. I think intuitively you kind of know, or you should know.
Yeah. I mean, what would be the other side of that? How could you,
I don't know.
what would be the justification? Yeah.
I don't know.
Like I said, if somebody's like doing an artistic interpretation, like, okay, here's my take on White Pony, or here is like that's cool. That's art, right? That's super dope. But like, if you're trying to pass something off as like, licensed merch, then I think that's lame.
Yeah. I don't entirely remember all of that conversation, but it did definitely prompt the question because I started seeing it even more. It's kind of like a whiskey plate when you get told like what a whiskey plate is, and then all of a sudden you start spotting them everywhere. That was sort of how I felt.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, well, at least here in Minnesota, when there's like a W on I think is it a W or a D? When you see a D on a license plate, that is a note to police that person has been arrested for driving drunk before. So we call them whiskey plates. So it's like that. It's a signal. Go. It's a signal to cops. You know what I mean? So to me, that conversation was sort of a signal to me, like, wow, yeah, I do see a lot of like unofficial stuff, and it's, I don't know, it's definitely increased over the years. Okay, digression aside, I really want to ask about the next Bird album cover. My copy of Gore is framed, so I have this instead. What can you tell me about Gore?
That's really cool. That's another example of Chino having an idea very early on of something that he wanted to do. I went to meet with the band as they were, I think, wrapping things up on that album. They played a couple songs for me. We sat down to have an art meeting, and Chino just started riffing on like, he was like, how you're like when you're watching National Geographic or something on TV and they show like, he speaks very like creatively. He just expects you to kind of like know what he's talking about. Like, you see a sea of birds, against a blue sky when like, a wildebeest or something has come and scattered like the flock, of flamingos, and I was like, that is such a rad image. Like, I'm pretty sure I know what you're talking about. I've seen it before, but I just, in my mind, the the artist in me sees these colors and these patterns and this kind of like, I know what he's responding to. So he was like, I just want flamingos against the blue sky. And so at that point, you know, it was literally me trying to find the correct flamingos against the blue sky. And we went through a lot of hoops to try to like, you know, it's interesting because, you know, I've run the gamut with those guys from like completely blank slate. It's all, you know, kind of coming from within me to like that kind of like information where it's very detailed, but at the same time, there's a lot of leeway in that. You know, you have to find the right photo. It can't have any trees or can't have any muddy lakes or other animals or all this stuff. So it was harder than I thought it was going to be. You know, we found the right photo instantly in our initial meeting. I knew that I wanted to just have the album title on. I thought this could be so interesting if we either just don't have anything on it or we just put the album title in kind of a very elegant treatment, you know, because gore is kind of like this, you know, it's not such an elegant word. It's like the anti of elegance. So I thought, well, that's a no-brainer. Let's like treat this very beautifully. You know, and you have this push and pull of like this, you know, harsh word against this beautiful scenery. And, you know, that's how that took shape.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite cover for sure. I don't care what anybody says. I love I just love looking at that image. The image is just so rad. All right, last but certainly not least, what can you say about Ohms?
Ohms is probably one of my most favorite album covers to date. And so happy that, you know, not only favorite album covers for them, but just in, you know, in general of things that I've done. It's I feel like it's just a very interesting image that came about at a very interesting time. Yeah, it's like I submitted things to the band early on this year before the pandemic, and that was one of the kind of initial ideas I had. I think in talking with Chino early on, like in 2019, you know, we discussed wanting to do something that was a little more DIY and maybe kind of more of a lo-fi aesthetic. You know, not punk rock per se, but like definitely not like not Photoshoppy, not something just very kind of like clean, little bit of, you know, like I said, analog. You know, when I generate ideas like that, I make lots of things all at once. So I probably presented, you know, 5 to 7 kind of like really thought out ideas for this album, and the eyes were an image that I felt very strongly about, and I rendered the eyes in different ways. One was more punk rock, one was more kind of like very linear. And then there was this kind of rendition. This was one rendition that the band felt strongly about, so we just really kind of like worked to solidify that. But you know, before we did Ohms, I'd done the tour poster for the tour that got canceled. Unfortunately, it was Deftones and Gojira and Poppy, and it had the image of the screaming girl on it, which kind of almost, you know, also spoke to that aesthetic. Like, you know, it was predominantly black and white. It was like a little bit of like this kind of like lo-fi, you know, punk rock look. So moving into this record, I kind of like was already in that zone a little bit. I think what we did with the Ohms cover, like, you know, it's very clean and very iconic. And I really, you know, I love the way it can be used for so many different things. You know, that's one thing that I was really like, I, you know, kind of pitched to them as like, you know, here's how it looks on advertising. Here's how it looks like on a billboard, you know, here's how it is for merch. Like, I think it makes for some cool merch opportunities. I just felt like it was another hopefully iconic image that we could utilize, and then different, you know, from the albums we've done. I'm always trying to do something different, which is, you know, challenging. Yeah, I'm so stoked on that album, and I'm so happy that the fans embraced it. Really, you know, like I've heard so many amazing, you know, so much great feedback that it's been just, you know, so exciting to hear, because you never know what, you know, what people are going to say. You know, this can be a challenging job at times when you're putting a piece of your artwork out there for, people to digest. And, they're so passionate about the music that, you know, you really try to do a good job to kind of like make something that's going to fit in with all that.
Well, I think people are as excited about like representing the music. You know what I mean? People are so excited about the merch. I mean, I love my shirt with the eyes on the
cool.
like that. It's just rad. It's really, I love the shorts. The shorts are the shit. Champion shorts. It's so cool. I do actually. I want to ask you too. Where are you at with Black Stallion? Have you finished work on Black Stallion yet?
We are. Let's say that we're working on things for Black Stallion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And in sort of a similar vein, did you ever get to work on any creative for Eros? Did you ever get that to that point?
I started some things. I remember working on some kind of loose logo ideas for the album title. I was very fortunate to be invited by the band to come up to the studio when they were working on stuff for that album to take photos for like 2 to 3 days. And I went up with a friend of mine and we shot a bunch of photos and actually shot some video of them up at their spot in Sacramento. And that was like super cool. And, I didn't know at the time that that's what it was called, but that is the time. And that's what it was, that is the era for it. And then I remember, Chino having the idea for the Eros title. So I started working on that stuff. Then obviously, it kind of like got pushed to the side a little bit, but yeah, there was some initial conversations. There was even some creative conversations about some artists that Chino was interested in working with at the time. So yeah, it was starting.
Did any of that imagery ever get used in any of the photos you took or anything like that?
We did use some of those photos during that time to like, say like, oh, Deftones are in the studio. We did a few little like teaser things that were online. Like, yeah, a lot of that stuff actually got used like for kind of like online things that were happening, little teaser clips and promotional tools at the time.
That's rad. That's cool. It's cool to think about. It's just cool to think about. It's neat to think about.
It was cool, man. I mean, it's so rad to like be, in their space when they're doing those things. Like I can't actually imagine being a musician and trying to come up with, my art or my songs and having other people around who I don't really know. I mean, not that they don't know me, but having someone else in that creative space. And like, so I feel so fortunate that like I've been able to be that guy, a handful of times and just kind of like be a fly on the wall, not in their face, but just kind of like observing it and, taking note.
Does that ever get old?
Never gets old, man. Wish I could do it every day.
That's so cool. Okay. I I have sort of a fun idea. I was hoping maybe not a game, but I was hoping that maybe I could pull out some random like things, some different things that I was able to scrounge up, and even in thinking about what this is now, I'm thinking about, God, I should have thought of that. And I want to ask you if you made it. So I've got a few things. I'll try to describe them for the listener, and just to find out, like, is this yours? Is this yours? Did you put your hands on it? Is that cool? Can we do something like that?
Yeah, it's fun.
Okay. So the first one, I'm almost positive this is yours. This is a laminate from the Diamond Eyes tour of 2010, 2011. And it's got this multiple image of this lady on it. And there was a poster that came with the meet and greet package. You could get this, you got the poster autographed. Is this your image?
Negative.
That's not your image. Can you
Not
tell
my
me,
image.
Can you tell me who it belongs to?
Can you show me the poster?
Yes. All right, hold on. I'll go grab it.
Okay. So same image. No. I don't know if can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so yeah, same image. No, I think at that point, sometimes they reach out to other people to do tour posters and stuff like that. I think I feel like I can track down who did that. I think I know who did that, but the short answer is no, I didn't.
That sort of leads to a digression here. Do you have a favorite tour poster artist?
Ooh, that's a really good question. There's a guy named Patrick Concepcion, He runs Concepcion Studios. I feel like maybe he was involved in some of that stuff, but maybe not. He's pretty rad. He's not just a tour poster guy, but like um
he does some sick
he
stuff.
does some sick stuff, and it's so rad because it's not, he'll like take, one of my album covers or something and put a such a crazy spin on it that like I could never even think of. I've hired him for a few things here and there. He's just amazing. I'm not up on my tour poster guys. I should be more, but there's so many rad people doing like, so many cool things.
It's one of my
I
favorite
can't.
things is tour posters.
Yeah.
Like I just love them. I've got like a couple of Jermaine Rogers. Everybody's geeked on Jermaine.
Yes, he's fantastic. He's done a lot of work with Deftones.
It's so cool. Like it's just cool to get different visual, like artistic interpretation, especially for a show. Like when you can take home something like that's rad. That's so rad. Okay.
Yeah.
My next one is something that is maybe also, I don't know if it's easy to see. I think this piece, it says searching the machine might reveal what you don't want to know. On the back of it, it says spring 2005, which I don't think anything got released during spring of 2005. 2005 was the B-Sides Rarities, which this doesn't feel B-Sides Rarities. It feels more Saturday Night Wrist. Is this yours?
Negative.
Really?
That's not mine either. And I think you either sent that to me or somebody posted that the other day, and I was looking at it. The pieces feel very much like something that I may have incorporated somewhere. Like that background, like you're saying, does feel like Saturday Night Wrist or something from that. I didn't make that, and I don't. Do you know what that lyric? What that is?
I don't know if it's a lyric. I don't know. I feel like I was a part of a street team at that time.
Yeah.
So I got stuff to put in the street, and I think that was one of them. Like I got
very interesting
pile of stickers somewhere. Like I got a bunch of stuff still. I got
interesting.
A ton of rollouts of the self-titled with the album, the release date on the back and that sort of thing.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just so that that piece I didn't actually do. It's rare that like something goes out that is like sanctioned by the band or the label that like I don't see. But a lot of the times once I've developed like the album package and the aesthetics for the campaign, it then kind of like it gets cast out to the people doing web stuff and merch stuff and everything. So I don't see everything. But that thing doesn't seem quite right to me.
Really?
I don't know what that is, but the typography is really big. It's kind of clunky on the back. Like I don't know what that is.
It's confused me for more than a decade now that I've been like, what is this?
Does it say deftones.com or is there any call to action for? Oh, so it has. Oh, okay. Interesting, dude. I don't know what that is, man.
Trippy, dude. Well,
yeah,
somebody's gonna make have to ask money on eBay now.
Yeah.
Okay. Couple more. So I know you've been involved in the beer. Is the Swerve City can yours?
It is, in that I'm kind of like the overseer of all of that stuff. I got to get this right. I hired an illustrator to do the typography and the beaver guy on that. I believe that was done by Hydro 74, who is like the most insane illustrator on the planet when it comes to the program itself. Illustrator. If you don't know him, look him up. He's insane. Hydro 74 did that for me. He did I hope I'm getting that right. If it wasn't him, it was Donnie Phillips, who's also like the most insane illustrator you've ever seen. I know that Hydro did Phantom Bride Skull for me, which was the first beer. So it's sick. So one of those, I know Hydro did Phantom Bride, and I'm forgetting where Donnie jumped in and did Good Morning Beautiful for us, which is like the beaver wearing like a little beanie and is surrounded by the roses. Yeah. So Hydro did Swerve City. He did the typography and the beaver, which we always have to.
I love the background too. Like this I've said before, it sort of reminds me of like the Saved by the Bell title card. Like
totally. It's totally 80s, like surf graphics, like
which is super rad.
So
Super
sick.
rad.
Yeah,
So
I
rad. I
love
love
it.
it. And this is something that I love. I know you were involved. This will be the last one. This is I know you were involved in the Dia de los Deftones stuff, and I do not have a Deftones tattoo yet. After getting this pod started, though, I've started to think about like a pony, but this is like something that I've long thought about. And it's, well, not long, it's a few years. This is a hat from the first Dia de los Deftones. This
Yeah.
skull with the diamond eyes. Is this yours?
It is mine, and again goes back to I hired Donnie Phillips to draw that. So the all the branding on that I thought was really successful. Sylvia G did the artwork for the poster. She's like an amazing fine artist who we worked with. I did all the logo types, so the Dia de los Deftones and the word Deftones and all that stuff. And then my friend Donnie, who's like this sick illustrator, I said, I just want some sugar skulls that I can use, for merch and things like that. So he just busted out with all these like little guys. So that's his illustration. If you, on the flip side of the hat, it should have Deftones under the bill, right?
It sure does.
Yeah. So that's my logo type.
I love that the N is backwards. It's so rad.
It's a little gangster, it's like a little gangster vibe to it, like, which I love typography like that. So it's like the clean version of a little bit of a gangster type.
With the past, with Dia de los Deftones for sure. With the past few albums, it just seems like everything is so in sync. It's been a lot of fun to enjoy and just experience.
Man, I appreciate that. It's like what we strive to do, is and we really want things to be cohesive. And when we can do it, I feel like we're having a lot more success with being able to control all the pieces, lately. Like back in the day, it would go to so many different people that like people would use the wrong fonts and logos and all this stuff and things we could kind of water down. But I really feel like over the last like 10 years, like we've been really able to kind of like steer the aesthetic into like this cohesive look. So I appreciate you saying that.
It's really cool too to know that like you're doing the merch, because I've for a while been saying how dope the merch is. I mean, I've got so many like great t-shirt memories of Deftones tees over the years. The Panther that said Deftones Inc. underneath for a while. Like there are just so many great tees over the year. But like,
I've done a lot. I got to shout there. They have a merch company that does a lot of that stuff too. So I'm not doing everything. I did do everything for Ohms. And obviously, if you're throwing it back to like Pony and, pieces of like my album art that they're using, that's obviously comes from me. But, they have a great merch company that they work with too, that comes with fresh ideas. So, for you saying that they're looking good, that's great.
That's really rad. So how I'd like to conclude every podcast is with a request for 3 recommendations. The inspiration is something that Chino said on a pod where he said he only tweets out YouTube links to songs because he thinks that's like the dopest thing that you could get from him is a song recommendation.
That's cool. Yeah, I love that.
So if you could give me 3 recommendations of absolutely anything, old or new, any medium, it doesn't have to be art. It could be somebody who's a great TED Talk. I don't know, whatever you got. People have recommended booze or different, anything at all.
3 things.
Yeah.
Man, I wish you would have given me a heads up on this. I would have come up with some cool things. I'm so bad at like.
If you want to follow that, we could always do that. We could always do a follow up because I'm probably not going to publish this for a little while. If you want to come back with it and like put it.
No, I should give you some answers now, but I would have loved to have spent a minute on it. I'll talk about some music I'm really into. I've really fallen in love with like these kind of like really aggressive hardcore bands, as of late. So like some bands that I'm really into are a band called Fury. There's another band called Narrowhead. They've got this like really almost like Smashing Pumpkins kind of Sunny Day Real Estate like kind of vibe to them. There's a sick band called Gulch that's like out of control.
I love that album. I love the EP they just dropped. I love.
Oh,
Gulch.
cool.
Yeah, super into Gulch.
So those are 3 bands. I would say, I would almost like, break it down into like groups of things, yoga and spinning. Let's talk about, yeah.
Tell me. So you're into yoga and spinning, yeah?
I've been doing a lot of spinning and trying my hand at more and more yoga during these challenging times.
What are they doing for you?
Well, it's a whole other, conversation, but, obviously good for the mind, body, and soul. I'm blessed that my wife is an avid yogi. So she's kind of like taking me under her wing and kind of like, bringing me along, the road to enlightenment. So, it's been amazing. And, yeah, just puts you in a good space mentally and physically, and spinning just kicks your ass. Yeah.
Frank's cool as hell, man. That was so awesome. Thank you, Frank, for making time to speak with me and allowing me to share your Deftones story. A couple of quick notes. If you want to see the items I showed Frank during our little game of Did You Make It, I've got some pictures on my Instagram feed at Woodbruh, WOODBRUH. Also, you should absolutely listen to Behind the Visual with Mark Hansen and the Podio Slave podcast. Both have excellent conversations with Frank. He's also been on the Powerline podcast and Undercovers if you want to hear more with him. Next week, I'm speaking with Darren Eggleston, who worked in radio promotion for Maverick Records during Adrenaline and Around the Fur. He shared some really great stuff with me, like the time Deftones apparently started a riot in Arizona. He was there. Darren got Korn played on K-Rock. That's how he got recruited to join Maverick and work with Deftones. His story is super cool, and he's really insightful too. I'm stoked to share that with you. I've also got conversations with Zach and Kelly from 30 Nights of Violence to share with you. I spoke with Stephen Vogel, owner and operator of Black Lodges. I got some awesome conversations with fans I want to share with you, and before long, you'll hear me talk about Deftones with Braun from Mastodon, which really only could have been cooler if we were doing it in person with beers in our hands. Once again, my name is Woody. Thank you for listening to Deftones, and thank you for listening to Change in the House of Pods.